I'm ready. You ready? All right. These guys are being rude up here. All right. Hey, we're going to just talk tonight. When I was, ever since I was born, I always thought I was right. Does that make sense to you guys? So you always have opinions, and you always have an answer, and you always think that at least in the meantime that what you're thinking is correct. Does that make sense? So you just always have the answers, right? Until you find out that you're wrong, and then you're wrong for a second, then you change your mind, and then you're right again. Does that make sense? That's been my experience. I don't know if it's been your experience. But we've always it's just as people filled in the blanks of who God is. You've always had all the answers. I'm not saying that the answers were correct, but you've always filled in the blanks with something. You know what I mean? You read an Old Testament story, you filled in the blanks. You know, you read the Bible, you filled in the blanks. And the other week I was talking to you guys about how God doesn't. To have a relationship, you need two people. He's not interested in you having a relationship apart from him, or pretending that you have a relationship with him when you don't, apart from him. So he's not overly interested in you knowing him outside of his presence. That makes sense? But how many of you guys know that there was a time when I knew him outside of his presence and I came up with conclusions about who he was? Make sense? So God wanted to have a relationship with me, wanted me to be in his presence and have the Holy Spirit teach me about him. But me, not lacking understanding, just did relationship with Jesus Christ without him. And it seemed like the key phrase back then was, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Well, is there any other? Of course I do. Make sense? Okay. As I've gotten to know him a little bit more with him instead of apart from him, I've had to change my mind about some things. And the reason I had to change my mind about some things is because I wanted more of him, and I wanted him to be in my life more, but I had to remove the answer that I plugged in there with something else that he wanted to teach me. But it's painful because the answer's just always been there. And sometimes I'm hesitant to change my mind because I've always had my mind set on what I thought was true. Does that make sense? Okay. How many of you guys know, like when you were young, your parents disciplined, you didn't really get their motive behind it? Like, how many of you thought your parents wanted you to be good for their sake so they didn't look like terrible parents? Do you know what I mean? As if they were in need of something from you. As if they were in need of your approval. As if they were in need for you to behave for their sake. How many of you guys know that they were trying to discipline you to make you okay for you to grow up in this world and be okay? Does that make sense? But there was a time in my mind where I thought my parents wanted something from me, therefore their discipline was their way to try to get me to behave in a certain way. Make sense? And so then some people end up doing this with God. That God needs something from me. He needs me to behave in a certain way. Then they read the Bible and they go, oh goodness, here's the law. Look it. Here's the behavior he wants. I knew he was in need of something from me and he needs me to behave for his sake. Make sense? I mean, it's really easy just to come up with these conclusions when you read the Bible apart from him, from the author of it. What I want to talk to you guys tonight is just a little bit, mostly, it's just about faith, and I wish I could, like I was doing marriage counseling the other day, and somebody even asked me today, and they said, you know, how do you stick with this? Like, how do you keep your mind straight? And I told them, oh, it's such a struggle. I said, it's so hard, don't even try. I'm joking. I said, well, at first, the first thing that I came to the conclusion was, and I didn't know this before, but I said that I became aware of the devil's schemes. I had no idea he was talking. And how many of you guys know let's say, you know how you have the mind of Christ? And if all your thoughts are from the mind of Christ, why on earth would we have to take every thought captive if it's from Christ? That makes sense? We have the mind of Christ, but the Bible says that you take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So if every thought we have is from Christ, we wouldn't have to do that. What's the author saying? That not every thought we have is of Christ. Make sense? So I became aware that somebody else was talking. Real easy. The other thing I did was I had to come to the conclusion that I wasn't a sinner anymore, that I was a new creation, and that I had been given the fruits of the Spirit. That's it. And then everything's gravy. I'm serious. It's really that simple. If you believe you have the fruits of the Spirit and you believe you're a new creation, you will act accordingly. You can't, you are living life based on what you believe about yourself, period. That's why there's an identity school. If you, for example, like you're a man, right? And all Christians know that every man has a problem and it's lust, and if that's every man's issue, that's scary. Do you know what I mean? As if the cross can't do anything about that. Do you guys know why Jesus gave us self-control? So that we would have a different option, right? But now here's the thing, am I trying to have access to that option, or have I become the option? And when did I become the option? When I received Christ, I became self-control. Does that make sense? But if you're trying to gain self-control, have fun doing that. Because I bet you'll find a bunch of men who are struggling with it too, and you guys will justify the struggle because it's every man's problem. Make sense? It's not every man's problem. It's the problem lies in what you believe about yourself. And if you believe that you have that problem, well, congratulations. Now you do. But if you believe you don't have lust in your body because somebody dwells in it, and now you have self-control, you don't have that problem. And even if you were to slip up, Father, I forgot who I am. That stuff has nothing to do with me. For a second, I took my eye off you. Thank you that you died. Now I remember. I have self-control. Same thing with anger, right? Do you have anger issues, or do you have patience? Have you become patient? Well, no, I still get kind of angry. Well, hold on a second. Are you patient or not? Or are you trying to be patient? If you're trying to be patient, have fun. But if you've become patient, it will manifest. But it all depends on what you believe, right? Are you trying to, when somebody says this, and I'm sure, Dawn, they've said this, they said, I need to come work on my marriage, right? Well, what are you saying? Are you saying that you need to be told who you are so you can remember what you've become? Or are you coming to identify a problem that doesn't even exist that you're going to work on? Does that make sense? You can't even get away from identity. There's no wiggle room in this thing. If someone comes in for marriage counseling, we're just going to get you baptized. And we're going to make you a new creation. How's that sound? Okay? And then now we're going to believe the gospel that what we became at baptism, we're going to believe now. Does that make sense? But what we're not going to do is go digging and rooting to find some problem that doesn't exist. And if you need to die and go to heaven to have Jesus tell you that problem didn't exist, I didn't tell you you had that problem. That's something you came up with. Could you imagine that? Your whole life thinking you had a problem, and then dying and asking God, why did you allow this problem to be there? And then him saying there wasn't a problem there. I actually created you in my image, you just didn't believe it. Yeah, but the doctor said, you guys understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Who told you were naked? So sometimes people come in for marriage counseling, and what they're saying is, or they'll come in and they'll say, I desperately want my spouse to be saved, but what they actually want is for them to be saved from their spouse. That makes sense? And it's like, well, hold on a second. I'm pretty sure Christ has overcame the world, and I think everything's okay. And if you need to be reminded of that perspective, that's one thing. But here's the tricky thing. How many of you have ever misunderstood your parents? Right? I haven't. I don't know how you guys do it. All right? No, I very much misunderstood. The enemy came and told me what they didn't do, what they should have done, how I would have done it better. Things that they did that they actually didn't do. things that they did do that he took from me for me not to remember because it was loving. Yee. You guys hear that? There were things my parents did that were beautiful examples of love that were taken from me so I couldn't remember. Did you guys ever do that? Ask God to give you back memories that were taken of your parents loving on you? Has anybody ever done that before? It's amazing what you'll recall whenever you ask back what was taken. Because a lot of times people just remember the bad, and the bad comes forward, and that's what you remember. It's a scheme of the devil that we're often unaware of. I challenge you guys to do that tonight. Go, Father, I'm just asking for the memories back of when my parents loved me well. And just watch what happens. It's exciting. It's fun. Honor your parents. Find out what happens. I wonder if it'll go well with you. So I want to talk to you guys about faith tonight, but before I do, can I just read you something? It's fun. But going back to the... No, we can't. We can't do that anymore. We're going to read. Delight yourself in the Lord. This is Psalms 37, 4-6. And he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he will do it. Okay. So how many of you guys have done this? What I just said to do. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. The first thing you'd have to do to delight yourself in somebody would have to begin to get to know them. Because to delight in somebody you don't know would be like getting really excited when your aunt comes over who you don't really know. Or getting excited to a person breaking into your house with a ski mask on. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you're here. And not really knowing why they're there. And it's not cold out. Okay? Like you have to get to know somebody to delight in them. So we're not delighting over burglars that are coming into our house. Unless you're really moving in something. Like Smith Wigglesworth or something. So this is what like, and the last thing that I was going to say, it was just understanding the schemes of the devil, believing that I received what happened to me at baptism and that I became a new creation, fruits of the Spirit. And then finding myself active in getting into the presence of the Lord. Okay? It's everything. And if what I just said is true, if getting in the presence of the Lord is everything, it's going to be the one thing that the enemy is going to try to make sure that you don't do. You understand that? And I'm not about like going demon hunting after this and going and chasing him when we can just get in the presence of the Lord. You guys understand what I'm saying? Just get in the presence of the Lord. If you just get in the presence of the Lord, things begin to change. Then you get to know him, and when you get to know him, how many of you guys were at Praise this Sunday? Yeah? Did you guys see Danielle go nuts? Oh, awesome. We have this one woman, and we're just sitting there, and like as a pastor, let me just be frank real quick. I don't always know what the Lord's doing. Okay, I wish I could tell you. I wish I could say to you, oh, this is what the Lord's doing now. I'm praying, and I open my eyes, and things are just going crazy, right? Brian Conley's arms are about to fall off, and he's just like, and he's just going nuts on the drums. And this woman just comes out, and it wasn't like a white person two-step, like during worship. It wasn't. It was some crazy African shake these chains off, I'm coming through thing. And I was just like this. I was just standing there. I was like, whoa, what's going on? You know? And I've never seen, I mean, the flesh hates it. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? The flesh hates worship. It doesn't want to worship. Actually, the flesh will worship if everybody else is worshiping. Do you know what I mean? The flesh wants to blend into worship. And so, like, you can walk into worship, and the flesh doesn't mind you singing, and the flesh doesn't mind you clapping if everybody else is clapping. Makes sense? The flesh would mind if you were the only one clapping. So you walk into worship. You might do this a little bit. If everybody else is doing that. You guys understand what I'm saying? To completely let go and rejoice in the Lord is rare. Is that okay if I say that? Typically, everyone is just kind of following everyone. What gets really interesting is when somebody has a personal worship time in the presence of the Lord, okay? And then all of a sudden you put them in corporate worship and they're not aware of the flesh around them and watching what happens. Do you guys ever see that happen? It's interesting. And the Lord loves it. He loves it. He loves that kind of stuff. He gets excited about it. I remember at our church, we don't have like a culture of like anything yet. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what's going to happen as far as like you might walk in on a Sunday and like this is all we get to. You know what I mean? Or like this one day, it was like everybody might as well have been doing the Margarina. I don't know. Everybody left their seat, bum rushed the stage, and I don't even know what everybody was doing. It was crazy. And I think God told me to do the Running Man, and I told him no. I said, I'm not going to do the Running Man. I did before I preached, though, by myself, because I wanted to be obedient, but I already blew it. Yeah. Yeah, that day. We didn't even collect offering that day. Oh. What is up? Do you know what was up with that? We collected, somebody left a basket outside, and we didn't even tell anybody. We collected $4,000 more than we ever had collected on that day Sunday. It was crazy. Do it again. Oh my gosh, that's a good point. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he will do it. So for you to delight yourself in the Lord, you'd have to know who the Lord is, and you'd have to get in his presence. Do you guys see Father of Lights? Yeah. August 8th. Okay. It's worth seeing. All right? I'm going to tell you guys that much. It is, it's awesome. And one of the things that I never understood, which Ravi Kandal is an incredible man. And he's an Indian guy who apparently knows everything and just talks to God all the time. This guy, Ravi, will ask God about us, and then God will show him us. Do you guys understand that? Like he'll give him updates on how we're doing. It's awesome. And like whenever I see Ravi Kandal or oh gosh, what's his name? David Hogan. I always just walk away just scratching my head. Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, okay, got it. That's amazing. They have really not only delighted in the Lord, both of them, but have really, the desires of their heart have actually become God. God has become the desire of their heart. They began to know God so much that God has become the desires of their heart. Not ministry, God has become the very desire of their heart. God has become the affection of their heart. That's amazing. Because we're so geared towards doing something for him. And I get that, and I love doing that stuff. It's awesome. But the affection of their heart is the Lord. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Well, what if your desire is him, and he's giving you him? Do you guys catch that? Isn't that beautiful? Whenever you rejoice yourself in the Lord to the point where he actually becomes the desire of your heart, and he's freely giving himself to you. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like abundant life. This is abundant life, knowing Jesus Christ and our one and only true Father. And he gives you the desire of your heart. And whenever you begin to decide that the desire of your heart is him, he gives himself over to you again and again and again. And those who have will be given even more of him. And those who don't have, even what they do have, will be taken. Wow. So, part of our vision statement is presence driven. Driven to get in the presence, and then to be presence driven after coming out of his presence. Presence driven. And that's what it's one of those three things, like, you know, when I sit down and and talk to somebody, if you're not getting in his presence, he can't become your affection. And when he can't become your affection, I don't know if you will have abundant life. Does that make sense? Because by getting in his presence, your life lived is saying, I want to know you. I want to know you. I'm getting in your presence because I want to know you. And there you will find abundant life. Does that make sense to you guys? I know what I'm not saying is if you say this prayer, you're going to go to heaven, and that's abundant life. What I'm saying is abundant life is knowing the Lord. And whenever you get into that place where that's actually what you want, nobody can take it from you. No circumstance, nobody's opinion can ever take it from you, and it's absolutely beautiful. In my getting in his presence, here's where it gets tricky, and I'm going back to what I said. When I get into his presence, he begins to tell me things about himself that are things that I've already decided that that's not true, but this is true. And then he's coming to say, hey, this isn't true about me, this is. And I have to let go of the things that I answered prematurely. Does that make sense? It's not easy to do. Because how many of you guys know that the things that I've had to let go of that I've answered prematurely are pretty common in Christianity? Does that make sense? So not only the things that are common in Christianity are the things that were commonly taught to me. So now I have these common things, and he's coming to make the common things and take them away and sanctify them and show me who he really is. But the temptation to hold on to the old answer is extreme because it's so common. Does that make sense? So when God comes to me and tells me that he's not a judge, I've been told that you are, man. And then when he comes and shows me in Scripture time and time again where he says, I'm not judging you, I'm not judging you, I'm not here to judge you, I'm not here. It just comes to life. Because how many of you guys know that what he's saying is going to match up with what he said? That makes sense? How many of you guys, what's so cool about getting into the presence, if you never get into the presence, how you guys will never hear what proceeds out of his mouth. And if you never hear what proceeds out of his mouth, you're going to starve and die. That okay to say? This is what he said, okay? But he says what proceeds out of my mouth. So it's almost like you get with him and he goes, and he breathes this book right onto you, and what proceeds out of his mouth actually gets on you. How many of you guys know there's a lot of promises in here? And we're not seeing all the promises happen. But if we were presence-driven, the promises would be breathed right onto us. My wife was there's no guilt or shame or condemnation, right? And so before I was baptized in the Spirit, I thought that everything that happened was God's will. That was 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, okay? And my wife had a deformed child in her belly, okay? And its heart and its organs were outside of its body. And it was missing both legs and an arm. You guys understand? I think it had one leg and one arm, and all of its organs were outside of its body. And so we went to go get the ultrasound, everything was beating, and it's oh, there's the heart, everything's fine. You guys understand what I'm saying? And when they told us that everything's not okay and that the baby's going to miscarry, we didn't even consider praying for the child. Does that make sense to you? We didn't even consider it because that's not something you would do, because it's common to understand that God's not healing today. That's common. Okay, I don't care how long you've been charismatic, right? In my opinion, there's in the United States, maybe 2% of the people think the way we do, if that, maybe 1. Okay, so it's common to believe that God doesn't heal. And so in my lack of understanding, right, perishing was happening. And there's no guilt or shame and thank God I know God enough that I don't feel guilt or shame over that. So we went and the baby passed and it was hard. But then I got baptized in the Spirit and life became real easy. I had no idea. All of a sudden the child died and the kingdom opened up. Does that make sense to you guys? My wife was going through hell and I just found out where heaven dwelt. Do you guys understand that? And she wasn't coming in with me And thank God I had enough understanding to understand. Do you guys know that the Holy Spirit will lead your spouse into all truth? Thank God. Oh my goodness. Because I'm not always the best teacher with my spouse. I don't know where you guys are at with that. I said, God told me something. I said, you'll get it in 2 months. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. And she gets it, and then we do it. And so there was a lack of understanding there. And whether the child would have been healed, that's not my point. My point is that as she was going through that tragedy, without even being baptized in the Spirit, she turned the child's room into a prayer room and began getting into the presence of God in the morning. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? She didn't do that before, but now all of a sudden she lost a child. Now she's getting in the presence of the Lord and wanting to understand who he is. It's fascinating. I was blown away. I didn't understand it. And here she is getting in the presence of the Lord. Do you know what happened one day when she was in the presence of the Lord? Breathed right on her. Do you know what he breathed? A psalm that says this: I make the barren woman a happy mother. He said that to her. She didn't read it. God said, go to November 15th in your devotional Bible and read Psalms and look at the end. And she did, and it said that. And she was just bawling. Why? Because she actually took the time to know the Lord. What do you think she did after she got pregnant? By the way, we tried to have a baby for 3 years. And the baby that we had miscarried. What do you think? Do you guys know what they say after 1 year? I'm not even going to tell you. It's not even a helpful fact. But do you guys think she rejoiced in the Lord? Yeah. But she wasn't able to delight until she knew who he was. Does that make sense? One of the things that has stretched me really hard is judgment and faith. It stretched me. The other day I talked to you guys about judgment, and I want to talk to you guys about faith today. For the life of me, Jesus had to be viewed as a loon. Absolutely. A loon who could do miracles. So, I mean, it was like a contradiction. This crazy person is going around saying things that don't make sense, but he's doing miracles. That's fascinating. Imagine this. Jewish people's view of Rome and Roman occupation, the enemy, unclean, Gentile, pagan, worship demons, ate pigs. Yeah, did lost people, right? And Jesus one day stands up and says to this Roman soldier, I've never seen greater faith in all of Israel from this Roman soldier. It's fascinating. Guys, he was involved in pagan worship. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? There was a pantheon of gods, and he was involved in worshiping them. I'm not saying he was devoted to the devil. I'm sure his flesh was just doing this with the rest of the people. Do you know what I mean? But that's what he went to, and he went to hear the prophecies that came from the oracles. I mean, this guy was a Roman soldier who had certain beliefs, and one of them was there's not one God, and one of them certainly wasn't Jesus Christ. And this man had the greatest faith in all of Israel. Do you guys get that? That's crazy to me. And what really challenges me is like, well, wait a second. What are you trying to say faith is, Jesus? Because like, it just throws a monkey wrench in my process of thinking, because I just want to say faith is trust in the Lord. This man didn't know who the Lord was. Do you guys get that? And so as I began to just be challenged on this, I just want to read you guys something. It might stretch you. All right. I want to talk to you about this, and we're going to just go right into Samson, because that'll stretch you. All right. Let me tell you, I'm just going to read, can I just read you something? Is that okay? Let me tell you the story of two men. The first is a man who wakes up. He lives in York, Pennsylvania. It's Sunday. He's getting ready to get his family to go to church. He has no expectation for anything out of the ordinary to happen whatsoever. In fact, he knows exactly what is going to happen. They will sing 4 hymns, hear the weekly announcements, have a collection for tithes and offerings, and hear a sermon that will most likely last anywhere between 12 to 15 minutes. Then he will shake the pastor's hand, try to think of something creative remark about the message, and then go on to a restaurant and eat with his wife and 3 children. This man will be in a small group this week with fellow believers. It will go the same as it does all the week. They will read the next chapter in the book, answer 5 questions, share their opinions, eat dessert, and go home. He'll get around to reading his Bible 2 or 3 times because he feels guilty if he doesn't. And he will pray before he goes to bed, and he will pray before some meals in front of his children. The closest thing this man will come to a spiritual encounter with God will be an emotional response while he is watching a movie in which a courageous actor does something courageous. Okay? What do you guys think about that? I hope I don't sound like a Debbie Downer. That's common. That's common. And these people are waiting for a charismatic, believing individual to show them otherwise. I'll put it that way. Through demonstration. The second is a Haitian man who just lost his son to an illness and is traveling 10 miles to meet with the local witch doctor. The man is making the journey because he believes that a neighbor has cursed his land and that his surviving children are in danger. As the man approaches the witch doctor's house, he begins to feel something deep in his spirit. To describe it plainly, the word would be anticipation. The man is expecting to have a spiritual experience with a man he has never met before. This is not an emotional response, for emotions are usually a response to an internal stimulus, like a thought or memory, nor is it an external stimulus like an experience. This man is simply walking, but something in his spirit is rising up to meet the occasion that he is about to meet. As he arrives at the cold, lifeless shack, the witch doctor calls him in and has him sit down, and the doctor prays over him, calling on the spirits of the land for protection. Guess what happens? The man receiving prayer begins to feel another presence in the room. As the witch doctor chants and dances away, calling upon the spirits of the land, it feels strong in nature, and he becomes aware that there are several other beings in the room. Although he cannot see them, he begins to become more and more aware of them. He feels them draw near to him, when all of a sudden the witch doctor stops chanting and sits next to the man in exhaustion. The man pays the witch doctor for his help, and the witch doctor gives him a bag of stones that he is to place under the beds of the children in his home. He walks away encouraged, knowing that something has taken place that he cannot plainly explain. What has taken place is demonic, and unfortunately for the man, the demons he experienced will not be interested in protecting him or his family, but taking and stealing what they can. Here's my question: which man has more faith? You guys get it? Which man has more faith? Isn't that weird? I felt weird writing that. I hope you know that. The reason I felt weird writing that is because I didn't want it to be true. But this Haitian man who doesn't know the Lord has expectation that he's going to meet something spiritual. That makes sense? There's that aspect of faith that I can't deny. It's called anticipation. You're actually anticipating. What's his life lived saying? He walked 10 miles. That's what his life lived says. Why did he walk 10 miles? Because of anticipation. Do you guys understand that? I can't help but ask the question, what pleases the Lord? Faith. There's an anticipation factor with faith that requires a life lived to anticipate what's going to happen. Does that make sense? How many of you ever got excited about coming to hear a speaker? Do you know what I mean? Big names coming in, right? Anywhere from like Adam Bauer to Brian Conley, okay? Huge. The place is packed out. You had to sleep out front, okay? It was cold. You got cold sleeping outside. You came in here and I healed you. Oh gosh, all right. Yeah, I'm more funnier than you guys let on. Anyway. Like you had anticipation when somebody was coming, right? What did you do differently? It's okay to raise your hand. I'll repeat whatever you say. Anybody do anything differently? Yeah. You get here earlier. Get a good seat? Okay. You waited out in the cold. My goodness. What? I was in the car where she waited. Yep. There you go. Gave her your coat. Said, put this on the seat for me. Anybody do anything differently? Yes. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. You canceled plans. You marked it on your calendar. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Prayed about it? Yeah. Okay. You actually talked to the Lord about that time coming up? Anything else? Yeah. Okay. It's a cool life lived. Anybody else? You didn't tell me to say this, okay? We didn't have a conversation before all this. You guys can do all that on a Sunday morning. You can anticipate great things on a Sunday morning. Yeah, I know you guys do. You can cancel plans. You can pray about it. You can get here early. You know what I mean? It's I don't understand it. I don't fully grasp what anticipation does in the spiritual realm as far as what God's about to do. The other woman, right, who he said, I've never seen greater faith, like the Samaritan woman, right? And they have this conversation. She's like, will you heal? And he's like, listen, you're a dog, and I got to feed my children. And she's like, even the scraps from the table, the dogs get to enjoy. And he's like, okay. That's amazing. You got it. She was so anticipating that he was going to do something that when he said no, she didn't budge. You guys get that? Joshua was so anticipating more at the tent. Do you guys know what I'm saying? That he stayed at the tent. When we first got baptized in the Spirit, it was amazing how late we'd stay. It was amazing how late we'd stay. And it was almost like who could stay longer? Because what's God going to do when there's only 3 of us left? You know what I mean? It was wild. And the anticipation, we have got to beat the anticipation we had when we first got baptized in the Spirit. The stuff that you don't want your believing friends who aren't believing in this stuff to see, we got to start believing for that stuff. You know what I mean? I've seen some crazy stuff. I think, like to just bring one of your friends in, when people are all holding hands, they're like, there's a river! A fire! And it's like, what? Let's go. I have no doubt that there is. You know what I mean? But it's there, man. Someone was expecting it. Somebody was expecting it. Somebody was expecting God to move, and guess what he did? He met their expectation. He really did. It's so much fun. God's amazing. He cracks me up. All right. I love experiences, but what you believe actually dictates your experience. Okay. I got to talk to you guys about Samson. Samson just rocks my world. How many of you guys know that because God gave a law, I assume that it was his delight that we obey it? Does that make sense? And Paul said, like, you never delighted in this stuff. Well, then what's it doing there? That makes sense? So, like, you begin to think that he's a lawmaker who wants his laws obeyed because if we obey his laws, well, then he can feel good about himself. But then, like, Samson comes and throws the biggest monkey wrench into that idea you could ever imagine. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So, like, you have this woman and this man, and they have a child named Samson, and they have an angel visitation, and the angel comes and says, I want you to take your child and set him apart as a Nazirite. And don't cut his hair, don't let him drink anything fermented, and don't let him, I think it's like something around meat, right? Extra care around meat or something like that. And so they raise him up in the understanding that, hey, I had an angel visit me, and he says that you're going to be the next judge, and like, so don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Well, I don't know what went wrong, okay? But somewhere along the way, Samson decided that it was okay for him to drink, that it was okay for him to eat honey out of a dead unclean animal. It was okay for him to not just marry Philistines, but sleep with Philistine prostitutes. Okay? He is breaking all the rules that you could possibly break. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? How could God use a man like that? I remember I read the Samson story, right? And like when I was younger, and in my understanding of what was common about God is that I really thought that God poked his eyes out at the end of the story. I mean, is that far-fetched? I mean, you read the Bible and God seems to be in the mood to kill sometimes and got your eyes, Samson. Should have lived a little better, right? Now he's in prison. I mean, that made sense to me, okay? But after I got in the presence a little bit, it didn't make any sense to me. And so then one day, God said, go back and read the Samson story, breathed on it for me, and it's fascinating. The story absolutely fascinates me. Why don't we just turn to it? Do you guys remember the Samson story? I assume you guys read Samson weekly. Let's turn to Judges. I believe it's 16. And how many of you guys know that he had little self-control? I mean, just turning it like 15:1. Later on at that time of the wheat harvest, I know that I'm just going to read something and it's going to be Samson's terrible character. You know what I mean? Like you can't get away from his terrible character wherever you turn. Okay? So Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. That's nice that he's checking up on her. And he said, I'm going to my wife's room, but her father would not let him go in. I was so sure you thoroughly hated her, he said, that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. So he went out, caught 300 foxes, and tied their tail to tail in pairs, which I don't know why he did. And then he fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain together with the vineyard and olive groves. Now, I understand that the Philistines are the enemy. Please hear me on that. But he also very much associates with the enemy. But then he kills the enemy. And he also associates with them and parties with them and then marries their women. Do you guys understand that? Samson has no sense of clean and unclean, what to do and what not to do. It doesn't seem to be even on his radar. One thing seems to be on his radar. Do you guys know what it is? Don't cut your hair. That's it. That seems to be the only thing, his only knowing of the presence of God seems to be this. You can drink, you're not supposed to do this stuff, but you've gotten away with it, so why don't you just hang on, buy a pinky to the last thing that you've ever not done, and which is cut your hair. Isn't that crazy? The only thing that he ever obeyed. And he had long hair.
He didn't have a Head and Shoulders contract.
No. It's probably nappy. Why is that significant? Well, let me tell you why it's significant. Because he killed 1,000 of the enemy with a jawbone. You just don't get to do that unless the Spirit of the Lord is upon you. He picked up city gates that weighed tons after he just got done sleeping with a prostitute that was a Philistine. Not that an Israelite one would be even better. What I'm saying is he just got done sleeping with the enemy, and then he gets up and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him and he picks up city gates that weighed over a ton and walked out. They were going to plot and kill him until they saw him do that. And he just dropped him in a field and just kept walking. He just got done sleeping with a prostitute. And I was reading this and I'm like, oh, well, he's going to get your eyes, buddy. He marries this woman named Delilah, and I don't know if he's drunk. I don't know what he's doing. But like, she just keeps bothering him. Just real quick. Go to 16. One day Samson went to Gaza. I know you guys are like, there's no way he slept with a prostitute. Where he saw a prostitute. And he went in and spent the night with her. And it wasn't to bring her to the Lord, guys. I wish it was. And he made her a Jew. It doesn't say that. The people of Gaza were told, Samson is here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we'll kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman. Do you guys get that? How do you pick up bars that weigh that much? I mean, like in the history, they say that they weighed over a ton apiece, over 2,000 pounds. He wasn't some freak giant. He was a Jew who disobeyed the law a lot. I hope this stretches you. This woman named Delilah comes along and takes him and starts saying, like you're so strong, Samson. Why are you so strong? She took new ropes, she took old ropes, she did all this different stuff. He says, if you mess with my hair in a certain way. But look at verse 16:14. Again she called on him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin in the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death. So he told her everything. Do you know what everything is? It's what he believed in his heart. Do you want to know what he believed in his heart? No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazirite, set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me. Do you know where his strength was? Yeah. It was that he was set apart. It was that he was called by God. It was in the Lord. And what he believes is that it's in his hair. And he believes, like, listen, guys, he broke every rule. This is the one rule that he hasn't broken. This must be the only reason God is still with me, right? And he reveals it to this woman. These are his words, that I've been set apart as a Nazirite, and no razor has touched my head. Why didn't he mention the fermented part? Why doesn't he mention the law? Why doesn't he mention any of that? Because he doesn't believe that. All he believes is that his hair holds the strength. How many of you guys know that they've done studies that actually say men with long hair actually have more strength? I'm joking. They didn't do that. You guys were like, wow. Yeah. You guys looked at your pastor and you're like, oh, gosh.
We make up for it with a beard.
Yeah. I make up for it on the back. I'm joking. Kind of. You guys. Okay. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more, he has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. Having put him to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off his 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Do you know what God's doing? Honoring what the man believes. Isn't that crazy? God actually honors what the man believes about himself. Isn't that crazy? I can't get over that. The man believes his strength's in his hair, and God is our strength. How many of you guys know that? And God honors his belief about himself, and the strength leaves him the moment that he cuts his hair. This is what happens. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they sent him to grinding in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Okay? Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, to celebrate, saying, Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord. You know what? Have you seen that yet in the story? Was Samson a praying man? Did you ever, granted, have you ever seen Samson actually get orders from the Lord? Did the Lord ever say, go and go tie foxes together, go do this, take a jawbone and go slay? He never, ever, and to our information, gave Samson orders. Do you know where Samson's orders came from? The promise. The promise of what? That they would receive the borders of Israel. Do you know what he was doing? He was actually taking his word and just believing and having the faith that if he went and did what this book promised was going to happen, that it would happen. Isn't that crazy? So he just did things. He just did things that were crazy. He had a life lived that said, I believe that these borders are going to expand, and he just expanded them. Okay. He was probably one of the most immoral people I've ever met in his life, and he's mentioned in Hebrews 11. Do you guys get it? Okay. Somebody got it. They said, wow. All right. Now watch this. O sovereign Lord, remember me, O God. Please strengthen me just once more. Do you know what happened? He had some time to think. And he found out where his strength came from. And then the process. Have you guys ever, did something wrong and then expected that God wasn't going to show up because of what you did? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Did you ever just, get in an argument with your spouse and then, maybe behave out of the flesh, and then you see somebody in a wheelchair, and you're like, I don't have time to pray, I'm so angry. Did you ever believe less in one moment and more in another because of the way you were behaving? And if it's sin to you, it's sin to you. Why? Because God honors what you believe. He's so cool like that. He really honors you, what you believe. Did you guys ever see Furious Love? Viewpoints? Did you ever see the Viewpoints, anybody? And you have Robbie Dawkins talking, and he's asking all the hard questions, and Roland Baker's talking, and not any one of those people agree with them. Nobody agrees with anybody on how this whole thing works. Faith, deliverance, nobody says the same thing. They all say something different, right? And they all have ministries, and they're all known for power. I think God's working in them to the degree that he'll let them work in him. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? What you believe, God will come. Even if it's there, God's going to give me strength if I never cut my hair. And he does show up to the degree that you'll let him show up. If you say this, God won't show up if I don't show up to church and have a good devotional life, God won't show up and heal the sick when I pray for him. Well, there you go. I bet you he won't. It's a kind of small belief you got there, but to your belief, yeah, there you go. I don't have the gift of healing. I guess you probably don't. Good job. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Hey, how you doing? He's working in what you believe. Isn't that incredible? Do you know what that means? It's exciting news. It's not minimal news. That means that you can have maximum belief. Do you guys know that I actually believe, and you might say, well, I don't believe that. Well, that's okay. I actually believe that I have access to all the spiritual gifts. I'll just put it that way. You guys, is that cool? You like that? Yeah. I believe that. I actually believe that I actually have all the fruits of the Spirit in my life. I don't have to try to obtain them. I've already been given them. I actually believe I'm not a sinner anymore. Yay. There's some people who don't. And they struggle, and they find themselves getting in positions they shouldn't be in, and this and that. God ends up in this story showing up for Samson again. Do you know why? Because Samson allows room for God to show up again. Do you know what he probably wasn't doing while his hair was short? He was probably, watch this. The fact that his strength left him only reinforced his faulty thinking. Do you get that? So this is actually incredible. And I think this is kind of what the verse means, that even those who have what they have will be taken. Let's say you have this minimizing view of God. Like, if I do X, Y, and Z, then God will do A, right? That's your belief. And so when you do X, Y, and Z, God does A. Why? Because you're allowing him to, because you believe it. But when you only do X and Z, he never does A, which what? Reaffirms your faulty thinking. But he's not reaffirming your faulty thinking, he's affirming your belief. He's showing up to the capacity that you let him show up. Does that make sense? It's good news. It's good news to those who don't have limits in their thinking, who believe all things are possible with God. It's good news. I've prayed for people at my church. Call it what you will. We haven't seen breakthrough yet. You know what I haven't done? Come up with reasons why we haven't yet. Isn't that cool? I like it. All right. All right, this is what I want to do. I've always regret not doing this. I want you to take a break, like a 5-minute break. I know we don't typically take breaks at night, but I feel like when we don't take a break, nobody has time to process. And like 2 hours goes by, and then when I ask you for questions, everyone's like, duh. You know what I mean? So why don't you guys just take 5 minutes, right? And if you have questions, think of what they are, okay? Take a 5-minute break. Hey, how you doing? Good. Okay. So we don't have to do anything with the video? We don't have to do anything? We can just go? Okay. So we're going to keep rolling. Now, we're going to take questions. You go. There's too much fellowshipping. Not enough questions. Yes.
I showed you what I had written down, and you said to me that
All right.
I showed you what I had written down, and you said to me that you explained it a little bit differently, and I don't quite understand what you said, and I was wondering if you could please go back over that.
Okay. Everybody just go to Hebrews 11 for me real quick. All right. Okay. Go to verse 6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Flesh is hostile towards God. Okay? Faith is pleasing to God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And I just want to give you guys an example. If I went to a church, right, that talked about supernatural things, but I wasn't experiencing the supernatural in my life, good job. You know what I mean? That's awesome. That you'd be able to hang in there and be able to say, I want to experience those things in my life. The Bible says that his sheep will hear his voice, right? In John 10. How many of you guys know that when you read that in the Bible, you can say, my sheep hear his voice, I'm his sheep, I'm going to hear his voice, right? Or you could say this, I don't hear his voice, I must not be his sheep. Does that make sense? Sure. And one's very flesh and very logic-oriented, and the other one's very faith and very determined, very expectant. Okay? This is what I'm saying. There should be a life lived that follows, I am his sheep, I will hear his voice, which means what? That you should probably find a closet and shut the door and get in it. Okay? And actually go into the closet with expectancy that you will hear him. Now watch this. So you go into this closet expecting to hear from God and you don't hear anything, right? But the next day you go in again, expecting to hear from God because you're convinced that you're his sheep. And instead of hearing anything, you just begin to thank him that you are his sheep, right? And the third time you go into the closet, all of a sudden you hear a verse, right? And it's another verse affirming that you are his precious possession. You guys understand that? Do you understand how faith works? Faith has a life lived that follows it. What I'm not saying is faith is deeds, but certainly faith has a life lived that looks like you believe something. Okay? I said this on the first day. There's a lot of you guys who are here that didn't get to hear me say this. How many of you guys know that there's a place where you don't believe God heals the sick, okay, today, and so you don't pray for the sick, nor do you expect to be healed if you ever are sick? Make sense? At least this person has a life lived that follows what they believe. Isn't that good? That's awesome. So this person doesn't believe that the sick can be healed, therefore they don't heal the sick, and what comes out of their mouth matches their life. Good, right? There's a person here that's open to the idea that God might heal the sick if it was his divine will to do such a thing, but they don't pray for the sick, but they believe that somebody could be healed if it was God's will, and God happened to be in a good mood and did it that day. In fact, they'd be open to them maybe having someone pray for them, okay? And then over here you have somebody who's like, I believe that God heals today. They don't pray for anybody because they don't believe they can heal anybody, but they know that some people do pray for the sick, and they even know somebody who actually got prayer and was healed one time, but it's a rare occasion. Here you could have somebody, right, who believes that God heals the sick today, right? They don't practice it in their own life, but they go to a church that practice it, and they do see it themselves, and they believe that it can happen, and they believe that if they got sick that they would go and get prayer, okay? And then here you have somebody who has praise for the sick, believes that God can heal the sick. They've never seen anybody get healed when they laid hands on them, but they haven't stopped praying for the sick, okay? And then here you have somebody who's seen it occasionally happen. They lay hands on the sick, and they occasionally see it happen, right? And they get excited about it, and whenever they see the opportunity, they take it. And then over here you have somebody who prays for the sick, and every time they lay hands on the sick, they recover. Okay? But then over here, like way over here, somewhere, not even on that spectrum, you have somebody who says that God heals the sick, and they believe God heals the sick, but they have a life lived that doesn't pray for the sick, and they're deceived. That makes sense? These people were living their life according to what they believed. This person says with their mouth they believe something, and their life lived doesn't follow it. It's called lukewarm. It's scary stuff, right? So it's the person who's singing the song, God, my life is devoted to you, and you're doing the two-step in church like this, but their life isn't. There is no life lived that is devoted, and they're deceived. Do you know what I mean? And it's hard to reach them because they already believe, they say they believe something, but their life lived doesn't say it. It's scary stuff. It's sobering stuff. Like you want this to match this, right? Gosh, that's a tearjerker for me. Because you want your yes to be yes and your no to be no. Anything else is of the devil. You know what I mean? I'm very cool with the person who doesn't believe God heals today, therefore they don't pray. Amen. Amen. Your life lived matches your mouth. Way to go. You get it? What scares me is the person who says something with their mouth that they believe and their life lived doesn't follow it. They have all the right doctrine and they have all the right charismatic doctrine, but they don't have a life lived that follows it. That's the thing that gets me unnerved. That makes sense? Okay. Now, what was your question? Because I completely went down a road. I apologize. It was about faith. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. And I said, God is working within your frame that you've created for him to work in. He's working within the box that you've put him in. Did you guys know that oh my gosh, they actually couldn't tolerate God unless he was in a box, and he still got in the box just to be with his people. And they lugged him around everywhere he went, like a piece of luggage. And he still got in the box because he was looking forward to being within the proximity of his people. That's a God who will crawl into luggage just to be around the people he loves. That's a good God. How many of you guys know what he wanted? He wanted us to come up the mountain like Moses and tell us you're my treasured possession. I'll tell you with my own mouth. I don't want a mediator there. I don't want a law there. I don't want any of that there. In fact, my plan was to have you in Eden in my presence. All this other stuff is just me dealing with your mess. Right? Or you could have a common way of thinking about it and say that God did want the law because he's a lawmaker and he wants you to follow a law. Jesus didn't follow the law. You kidding me? Jesus didn't follow the law. He didn't stone the woman. The law said to stone the woman, and he didn't do it. People say, well, Jesus followed the law. No, he didn't. He fulfilled it, and he loved his neighbors as himself, and he loved God with all his heart, mind, and strength, which is the fulfillment of the law, but he certainly didn't follow it. Right? You guys understand that? That's crazy. Okay. This Bible blows my mind. Okay. I want you guys to listen up and get this in your heart. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. He's going to reward those who earnestly seek him. Do you guys want to be rewarded? The only thing that matters is just probably him and knowing him. Earnestly seek him. His word promises you that he'll reward you. That's utterly amazing. I know Ravi and David Hogan. I believe David Hogan wakes up at 4 a.m. Is that true? And Ravi wakes up at 4 a.m. Do you know why they wake up at 4 a.m.? Because they earnestly seek him. And they're rewarded for doing such things. R-A-A-V-I. I might have just made that up, though. It might just be R-A-V-I. Okay, thank you, Don. Ravi. All right. Is there, yeah, I'm going to make that up too, though. K-A-N-D-A-L-L. Is that right? Kendall?
He's not even paying attention.
Yeah. Kingdom Foundations is the name of his ministry. If you look that up, it has all of his info. Are there any other questions? Yes.
What was the Psalms for the delight yourself in the Lord?
Yep. I believe it's 37. 37, 4 through 6. Any other questions? You guys are so polite. Like nobody will raise their hand unless I ask if there are any other questions. Yes? Oh, I just read it. Hebrews 11:6. Okay? He's a rewarder of those who seek him earnestly. He really is. Do you know that like when I first got baptized in the Spirit, he dropped things in my lap? Like, they were just dropped in my lap. It was amazing. Like when I was a baby Christian, I mean, no effort whatsoever. Not that it's about effort, it's about a life lived, but I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew that God just showed up wherever I went in amazing ways. I bet you I had some pretty high expectations. I bet you my faith was through the roof because I just received something that I didn't believe could happen. And my best friend told me about it, and I had to believe him because he's my best friend. So I believed what Brian said about the Spirit, and it rocked me, and I just believed anything was possible, you know? And then you know what ended up happening? I came across this part in my walk where it didn't happen. I prayed for someone and they didn't get healed. And then Satan came and started to tell me why they didn't get healed. And he started to give me reasons why people weren't going to get healed when I prayed. And like Samson, I began to put God in a box and go down some just dangerous roads. You know what I mean? Did you ever hear anybody? Did you ever hear anybody toss a spirit of on a word? A spirit of deception, a spirit of this, a spirit of that. My God, we're giving things forms. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? And I remember, like, I prayed for this person that didn't get healed, and I asked this person who was seasoned why, and they said, well, they probably had a spirit of this. And I was like, well, what's that? And they were like, oh, they're all over the place, these spirits, these demons, and they keep people from being healed. Really? These demons keep people from getting it yet? Whoa. Maybe I should be tutored by those demons. They seem to have a lot of power. You guys get it? In the midst of people's experiences, they came up with some pretty funky reasoning, and I'm sure Satan helped them with it. I'm sure he was more than to oblige why. You know, after we had that miscarriage, Satan came to me and wanted to tell me why we had it. You know he has a reason for it, right? Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. You're correct. He wanted to come and tell me. I remember it. He didn't even bother hiding himself. He just came to me one time during my prayer and said, would you like to know why you had a miscarriage? And do you guys get the temptation in it? To know why? Do you know what I told him? No. No, Jesus. All I know is Jesus. And he left. But he's got reasons. All right. Any other questions? Typically, one person raises their hand after I ask that question. Yes?
I was just thinking, if Satan can give us the doubt God, then we can take further than
Yeah. If he can get you to doubt God, he can get you to judge God. That's kind of his main goal there. It's for you to become like him. Any other questions?
Well, I have it's kind of like a question in the testimony.
Okay.
4 years
Yeah.
Then I broke my ankle and I came to church and God took me on and I started walking on this broken ankle and God knew me as that. So he was confusing me. So then I kept saying, why can't you heal my throat? Why can't you help me with stop church? I just wouldn't stop churching. So the young man that was here every Wednesday, the bald-headed guy, I don't know his name, but he was here for the last couple of weeks.
Brian.
I went to him last Wednesday and I said, I hope you don't think I'm wrong, but I'm going to the doctor to find out what's wrong with my throat and my head because I can't take this no more. It's been 40 years I've been suffering. And he said, oh, no, you go and find out what's wrong. I'm not telling you not to believe in God. So I went yesterday. Well, they numbed the inside of my nose. And when the man opened it up, I was like, oh my God, no. He said, have you ever had trauma done to your head? And I'm looking at him like he was crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, all the bones in the back of your eyes are broken, they're shattered. Oh my God, I'm like, don't tell me that. That's why I keep choking and slamming. That's why I can't lay flat down. And you know what? I'm asking God to heal me because I didn't understand what was going on. But then when that man told me all these things are broken in the back of my now I know what God can do with me.
Yeah.
It's like so wonderful. I just couldn't stop crying. I kept saying, God, you love me. Thank you for these answers. So now I can get the help and I understand
Yeah.
my body's been feeling like this.
Yeah. Do you know what?
I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah. Hold your question for a second. Just a second. Don, you've been in this kingdom realm more than I have. But what I find is this charismatic movement ebbs and flows. And like where it's could flow with the Spirit, sometimes it does this. And there's kind of sometimes strange doctrine gets thrown in. Is that fair to say? And sometimes people begin to teach the problem instead of the answer. And we get really detailed around our, does anybody have a headache right here? Does anybody have a migraine? Anybody? No? All right. What ends up happening is like things begin to like ebb and flow. And like I swear, I feel like I just got in this thing and so many people are like even want to talk about why they can't tell me what's wrong because they don't want to speak it over their life. Do you know what I mean? So people will come up to me in prayer and say, I want to tell you what's wrong, but I can't. And I say, well, what do you mean? Well, I don't want to give it any power. What the hell? I'm sorry for my language, but I'm like, what are you talking about? Give it. Yeah, it's all right. I've said that in a sermon. It's a place. What, the Gehenna? It's like, so wait, you're saying that you can't tell me what's wrong and we can't pray because if you actually say it, you're going to give it power. Well, like, what the Gehenna is in us. You know what I mean? Isn't there power in us? And can't we overcome that? And it's almost like two things. The spirit of issue and people saying with their mouth what the problem is, it's almost like so fearful that, now imagine this, that you actually believe that if you use your mouth and say something wrong, that now you're cursed. Oh my God. Well, wouldn't that, like, isn't that a scary thought? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not, like, so listen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because for those who believe, therefore you are. Why don't we just not believe that? Does that make sense? So you, like, do you guys know, the last time I checked on Millie, she was doing good. Do you guys know who Millie is? From Harvest? She was having a pain throughout her body, okay? I had no idea about that. And we prayed for her, and it went away, and then it came back for a day, and then it's gone. And I checked on her the week after and the week after. You know what I mean? And I heard in my heart, the time's right now. The time's now. How many of you guys know that the time to be healed is right now? Do you guys understand that? The time is right now. So, well, maybe it's not God's timing. Well, I guess now it's not. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Because how many of you guys know that if you believe it's not God's timing, you're not going to come for prayer? And I'm sorry, I just believe that it is. I believe that the time is now. Because what's his will? And he never said it's not now. Jesus never said it's not now. I would love to heal you, but it's not now. It's not the time. He never said that stuff. So then why isn't it right now? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? And this is what happens. We go up for prayer, and let's say we don't see breakthrough. Well, then somehow our anticipation lowers, and then the next time they call for prayer, we don't go forward. Guess who wants to talk to you about why it didn't happen? And I wonder what he's probably going to say. He's probably going to say, it's not his timing yet. Do you guys understand? It's really like, because Psalms 8, I'm going off Psalms 8, he created us a little less than Elohim. We're sons of God. That means that we have real power. Do you guys understand that? We're not just creatures. We have more in common with the Creator than we do the creation. Okay? You have real power in your life, and you get to make the rules. That's crazy. My son, as much as I want to influence the rules for him and tell him what to believe, he essentially is going to make his own rules. You know what I mean? I can try to help him, but essentially he's going to decide for himself what to believe. It's just fathership, sonship stuff, and you really get to decide what's real and what's not. And you really get to not experience heaven if you don't want to now. If it's a place that you're going to one day when you die, and that's when it's going to happen, then yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. If heaven's a realm that can be walked in right now, and literally heaven and the Holy Spirit can flow out of you, and you can affect the environment the same way Christ did, and he actually called you to do such a thing, and to do greater things than he did, like the Bible says, well then yes, congratulations, it will. He doesn't even need you to. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't need us to walk in realms. He just loves us, so he gives us the opportunity. And he's not in need of anything from you. Do you guys understand that? Like, he's love. And love isn't in need. This stuff is amazing. What I found out, though, is that I was loved too. I found out that I became love. I'm not in need anymore. I used to need some of the congregation to stick around. You understand what I'm saying? I used to need like Don, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like when I showed up on a Sunday morning, I needed at least half the average attendance to be there. You know what I mean? For me not to get a little bit nervous, okay? So if we're running like 350 and only 100 show up that week, I used to be like, oh God, what is it, a national holiday? What's going on here? You know what? I'm not in need of anything anymore. I don't need my wife to do things for me. I don't. Does she do things for me? Yeah. Do I need her to? No. Do I need something? Do I need approval from men? I used to. I don't anymore. God said, I'm awesome. You know what I mean? He's telling you the same thing. Or is he telling you how awesome I am? God can't stop talking about me to people. Do you guys understand that? And because I believe it, I get to experience it to a degree that I do believe it. You guys understand that? I actually really think I am special, and I get to be treated as special because I believe it. So when I get alone with God, I understand that I'm a special guy, and he really enjoys my company. And you might say, well, how do you know that? Well, not only does the Bible say it, but I chose to believe that over the other thing I used to believe. You know what I used to believe that was common? Was that I was a sinner, and that Jesus Christ died for me because I was a piece of crap. He literally died for crap because he's a moron. Are you kidding me? He's a genius. And I bet you what he saw was worth dying for, and it was me. So I bet you I'm pretty special in his eyes. You guys understand that? And so when I get alone, I can't help but think about how special I am that he thought I was worth such a price. And then like, his investment is in visiting him. You get it? he's getting back on his investment. He doesn't need to get back on his investment, but his investment that he paid such a price for is coming to see him. You guys understand that? You know what my mom and dad must like? When I stop into their house when it's not a holiday and when it's not convenient. Do you understand what I'm saying when I say that? That must be really cool as a parent to have your kids stop in when it's inconvenient for them. No, I need a little bit of money. You don't need no money when you come. They're stopping by because they're in need. It's so much fun, guys. And like, you get alone in the presence of God and you don't put limits on what can happen when you're with him. And you don't look at your past history and determine that's what's going to determine. I haven't seen anything yet. I've seen a lot, guys. I've seen a lot. I've seen the Spirit do some crazy things. But I haven't seen anything yet. You know? I had a, I remember, and trust me, I'm not, I had two pastors in my life, in my old denomination, and I shared with them what happened. And the one said, that's nice. And the other said, will you lay hands on me? Do you understand that? And he went into an hour vision in which he was interacting with the room with his eyes shut. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And God literally showed him what the rest of his life is going to look like and what he's called to. Do you know, you guys understand that? Like how, yes, please. You guys get that? What kind of faith does it take to be taught in a certain way about what's common, and literally for a young man who you discipled to come to you and share what God's doing and for you to completely change your mind? Completely change your mind and say what you must be saying is real. Forget 30 years of history. What you're saying right now, it must be real. Lay hands on me. Oh! You guys know, that's centurion type stuff. You know what I mean? That's amazing. That's some faith. That still just shocks me today. I remember, it cracks me up, the same pastor, I was at church camp with Brian, and we were undercover charismatics in this church camp, and the power of God broke out so obviously that flags were going up all over the place. And I remember that pastor got on the microphone, and this is all he said. He goes, what Adam and Brian are moving in is from the Lord. I can't deny that this is the power of God. I'm submitting to their authority this week. And he hung up the mic. He's got 20 years of ministry on me and Brian. You know what I mean? So weird. You know what I mean? Like it just felt weird. You know what I mean? Like that kind of humility felt weird to me. Man, did he get rewarded. I mean, he got so rewarded. It's amazing. Can't take what God wants to do in your lives. It's amazing what he wants to do. What's even more amazing is how much we don't allow him to do those things. He's amazed by unbelief in the Bible. There's two things he's amazed with, unbelief and belief. I remember this one part in the Bible says, and he was amazed with their unbelief. It blew him away how much he wanted to do and how little they would allow him to do. It dumbfounded him. You know, I don't want to be on that one side. I want to be on the side. You can get really used to, I'm just talking to you guys now. I don't even know what I'm talking about as far as notes go. You can get really used to religious activity. You can't have intimacy by yourself, obviously. You need someone present there to receive your love and to receive love from. And I mean, guys, for the longest time, I just assumed that because I went to church and because I carried around a title and the denomination and because I went to confirmation class and because my parents were, that I was walking in what God intended. And I had no idea. I had no idea the things that God wanted to do and the ways that he was going to rock me. Do you understand? I had all the answers answered. And then one day he came to see if I wanted to change one of them. Just one. And he pulled the whole base out on me. He went, whoop, and he pulled it all out. And let me just encourage you. Like when I get alone with the Lord, I'll sit there, guys. Watch this. I'll sit there and I'll say, Lord, I'll say, what do you want me to know today? And he always says, I love you. That's what he says. And I go, I know. Is there anything else? And like at church camp and stuff and with these kids at VBS, like we'll close our eyes and we'll say, what's the Lord saying? And he's always saying, I love you. And I'll ask him, what is it that you want me to know? Apparently I have more knowing to do. Because you know what that implies? That I still haven't fully grasped it yet, which is exciting to me. And then I'll say, is there anything you want me to read today? And I'll be like, Luke 31:1. And I'll be like, darn it, there isn't a Luke 31:1. He doesn't know that. And I'll entertain the idea. And I'll go to Luke, right? And I'll find Luke and go to the end of it. And I'll go, look, it's not in there. And he'll say, Luke 3:11. Isn't that funny? Luke 3:11, not 31:1. What's he doing? He wants to see if I'll be obedient, even in the illogical, right? He does this type of stuff. He's weird. And do you know what? Just by me doing what he said, I know there's no 31st chapter in Luke, but just by me being obedient and turning to the end of Luke, do you know what I hear? The next part. Do you guys understand that? I don't care what he says, I just do it. You know how many people have been discouraged because they thought they heard God say something and the Bible verse doesn't exist? And they just close their Bible and they say, I must not hear from God. That's impossible. The Bible says you are a sheep, you hear his voice. Right? So then he'll say Luke 3:11 and then I'll read it, and I'll be like, and sometimes it's about Herod and I'm like, that doesn't make much sense. How does that apply to my life? And he'll do something completely different. He'll lead me to another verse and another one and draw me back to the first and then show me something really cool. Do you guys understand that? I wish I could tell you that happened every day. You know what happens some days? I'll be like, Lord, I'm in your presence. And I just don't even hear anything. And then do you know what I take that for? That it's time for me to speak. And so then I'll begin to speak. And I'll begin to tell him, you might say that sounds weird, but no, he loves it. I begin to tell him about how awesome I am and how I'm starting to believe it. About how he's glorified me. And he's lifted me above the blood of his son and how worthy he thinks I am and how I'm beginning to understand and how awesome he is and how faithful he is and how rewarding he is. Then I'll recount to him the things that he just did last week. And I'll begin to glorify him. You know what I mean? And if I really start to get in it, I'll start going like this. You know what I mean? I'll start to rejoice in him a little bit. And with the dog watching, I will begin to glorify the Lord. You know what I mean? And really just begin to seek him and look forward to the next time that I'm there to hear what he has to say, because he says he's going to reward me for that. It's time well spent. Do you guys get it? Getting into his presence, regardless if you feel his presence, is the best time you could spend, because he says he's going to reward you. And do you know what I want more than anything else? His presence. More of a recognition of his presence. I want his presence. I want his presence. I want to know what he's doing. Jesus walked around and did everything he saw and heard his Father doing. That seems like like not much freedom. It's the most freedom you could ever have. Have you guys ever obeyed the Lord? Do you know before the Lord gives you instruction and breathes on it, you have to obey what he says by faith? When you do that, when you have the opportunity to feel bad about yourself and you choose not to because you're not a victim anymore, because Christ died, and you do that by faith, guys, he rewards that type of stuff. If you think like that you're a victim because Jesus Christ died for you and he was victimized, therefore you cannot be a victim, and you choose to act in a different way than you usually act, he comes and he rewards that. It's amazing what he does. He's absolutely amazing. When you actually apply what we say with our mouth, right? When you actually see somebody who needs prayer and go up to them, unsure of what's going to happen, you wish you could be sure, but you're unsure, but you do it out of obedience because he says to go lay hands on the sick. Man, he starts nudging angels, and he goes, look down there. They're starting to obey me. I used to think that he needed me to obey him for his sake. And here he gave me instruction for my sake. Do you guys understand that? It's absolutely beautiful. I love it so much. I love obeying the Lord. But when I was young and I got called into ministry, I was so angry because I didn't want to stop smoking pot. You guys understand that? And I didn't want to stop drinking, and I didn't want to stop doing the things I wanted to do because I liked being the judge of my life and I knew what was best. Meanwhile, I was spiraling out of control. I didn't know it. I thought I was in control. But the plane was tail spinning. And I really thought he wanted to rob me of my fun. I really thought that he just wanted to be the boss of me. And here I found out that not only does he not need anything from me, but he's totally for me. And that when I obey him, I look back and have a life lived that says I'm following him. I actually start to believe in my heart that I'm following him. Do you know what happens when you believe that you're actually following Christ? More stuff happens. When you have a life lived behind you that says, I obey the Lord, you actually start to believe that you believe this stuff, not just with your mouth, but with a life lived. Look out. Stuff starts popping. Stuff starts popping left and right in your life with the Lord, because now Satan can't pull out a pistol in your alone time and shoot you with your life lived. He doesn't have anything in the clip. All he has is you worshiping and getting alone with the Lord and honoring your spouse and your parents, and he's just there's no bullets in the gun. It's awesome. That's a clean conscience, and it's awesome. It's a lot more fun than one that isn't clean. Okay, sorry, that was a tirade. I just feel like nobody really models for us what prayer looks like sometimes. And I was told to say my prayers, and I was told what to say, but no one told me about him and how awesome he was. And I was told that I should worship him, but I wasn't told why I should. And I had the feeling that he needed it. He doesn't need me to worship him. I just found out who he was, and it was natural. Make sense? All right. You guys will be two-stepping this Sunday. It'll be good. All right. So why obey? And we talked about this last week. What got them out of the garden was unbelief and disobedience. Do you know what gets us back into the presence? Obedience and faith. And as for much as that sounds like a stinker, it's actually awesome. Because we obey what he's saying to do because we're trusting that he knows what's best. And how many of you guys know that you can misplace obedience, and there's different reasons why you try to obey somebody? Because you're trying to please them, because you're afraid of them, because you believe that they know best. I obey the Lord because I'm convinced that his way is going to be better than my way, and that he's shown me and demonstrated to me that he does know best. Do you guys understand that? And so as I obey him, right, because obedience actually brings me into the presence of God. As I obey him in my alone time, it becomes bigger, okay? But when I believe him, and now you mix that with the box, whenever you blow up the box and you begin to obey the Lord, anything can happen. Does that make sense? I don't think Samson had many encounters with the Lord. I think his parents did. I just don't think Samson did. I think he had a small box, and I thought he missed God's heart. He missed the heart of God, but he had faith, and that's what pleased God. So the presence of God was still with him because he had faith. Does that make sense? God's attracted to it, and he can't help but want to be around people with faith. It actually gives him room to move, and he wants to move in your life, but he can only move to the degree that you let him move. Does that make sense? And to the degree that he can move is to the degree that your life lived matches what you say you believe. So if you have a life lived that doesn't reflect what you say you believe, and you wonder where God is, hello, there you go. For example, you say with your mouth that God has picked out a spouse for you, but you're sleeping around with other people. That makes sense? Don't have sex before you're married. Why? Because I want you to obey me. Well, no, it's for you. Does that make sense? So watch this. God, I thank you that you have my spouse picked out. I'm going to go sow my oats. Why? I don't believe that you have my spouse picked out, and I got to get in where I can right now. No one says, God, you have my spouse picked out, and then doesn't set themselves apart. That's what you do. You set yourself apart because you believe he has somebody set apart. Does that make sense to you guys? Your life lived is declaring what you believe, not what you're saying with your mouth. And I understand that your mouth can say what you believe, because out of the mouth the heart speaks, right? No, that's too bad. Can I say it anyway? No, I shouldn't. Anyway. Had to do with the butt, and it was bad. The buttocks. Anyway, I want to read something to you guys. Go to Galatians. And I want to end with this. And as you're doing that, I'm going to read something else to you. In Romans 1 and 2, basically you have these people who did not glorify or give thanks to God. They knew him, but they didn't glorify or honor them. Therefore, they were given over to their futile thinking in their darkened hearts. All they had to do was honor and give thanks to God, and it would have protected them against their flesh, and they wouldn't have fallen into this thing. It says, do you think lightly of the riches of his kindness and the forbearance of his patience, not knowing that the kindness of God leads you to repentance? You know what leads me to changing my mind? His kindness. His kindness. Do you know where I experience his kindness? In the prayer closet. That's where I experience his kindness. So Galatians 4:22 says this, for it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the bondwoman, one by the free woman. But the son of the bondwoman was according to the flesh, and the son of the free woman through the promise. This is allegorically speaking, for these women are two covenants, one proceeding from Mount Sinai, bearing children who are to be slaves. She is Hagar. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free. She is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, barren women, who does not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For more are the children of the desolate than of the one who has a husband. And that speaks of faith. And you, brethren, like Isaac, are children of the promise, but at that time he was born according to the flesh, persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit. So it is now also. But what does Scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be an heir, but the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of a bondwoman, but of the free woman. This is what I find common. I find that at the table that sits, Abraham and Sarah, Hagar and Ishmael. What's Hagar and Ishmael, allegorically speaking? Everything that you did apart from faith because you didn't have it yet. Does that make sense? Literally, Abraham made love to Hagar and they had an Ishmael. Why? Because he stopped in the promise. He did it his own way, carved his own way to have a child, right? What I find is that the moment, you got to understand the tensity around this, the moment that Isaac is born, now what sits at the table is the very reminder of the thing that you did wrong and how you messed up, right? People call this worship. People call this worship, feeling condemned and being reminded of what they did wrong. And they go to church on a Sunday to hear it. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? And Hagar and Ishmael sit at the table now with Isaac, and Isaac is the promise. And it is the inheritance that's going to go to Isaac. What's the problem? Hagar and Ishmael sit at the table. What does God call us to do is to send away Hagar and Ishmael. What does Hagar and Ishmael represent? Everything that you did apart from faith. Everything that you did wrong. What I find is that most Christians are torn because you have to be torn whenever you have double-mindedness and two things sit at the table with you, right? By faith, listen to me. You have to do it. Everything's done according to faith. By faith, Abraham had to send Hagar and Ishmael away. Do you guys know that they're just going to die? I mean, there's no man providing for them. They were just walking dead meat. In fact, they went to go find a place and die in the story. When they went to go find a place and die in the story, do you know who shows up? God. An angel takes care of them, right? And by faith, Abraham had to believe that God was going to take care of everything they did apart from faith. Do you know what I just believe? I believe that God has handled everything that I've ever done apart from faith. Thank God, right? Everything that I did according to all of my unbelief, he's handled. And this is absolutely fascinating to me. Did you notice God didn't suck Hagar and Ishmael away? But he actually makes Abraham send them away. Why does he do such a thing? Do you guys understand what the concept there? It's up to Abraham to send them away or let them stay. You guys get the concept? God wasn't going to suck them away. Abraham had to send them away because it was according to his belief. It's fascinating to me. It's not really talked about that often. It's always talked about that the faith that they had for having Isaac. Meanwhile, the faith that he had in sending away Ishmael and Hagar. It's the same concept. It's up to you, to the degree that you're willing to believe, to send away literally every experience, every other person's opinion, everything you've ever done wrong, to literally send it away and believe that God's going to handle it. Do you guys understand that concept? Every circumstance, every time you've prayed and nothing's happened, everything, right, is sitting at the table, and you get to send it away by faith and say, God, I thank you for handling it, and literally look at Isaac with anticipation that he's going to receive the promise. That's your life lived. Or, without faith, you leave Hagar at the table and Ishmael and Isaac, and you live a double-minded life with the promise and with your error and your lack of belief in the promise. And you try to live a coexistent life. It's torture, and God doesn't have that for you. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So this is what you get to do. And I remember talking to Ravi, and Ravi was saying, he goes, what's your prayer time like? He's like, don't spend a lot of time talking to God about your problems. You shouldn't have any. You guys understand that? And I really understood what he was saying. What he was saying was, he said, and don't spend a lot of time talking about the things that you know aren't important. He said, but just spend time in his presence and just glorifying him. How many of you guys know that I can't spend time in his presence or glorify him if I'm feeling too bad about Hagar and Ishmael? Do you guys understand that concept? There's no guilt or condemnation in Christ. This is a really easy concept. So Satan comes to remind you of the things that you aren't and the things that you didn't do. And he shoots them at you. Meanwhile, you're sitting there trying to spend time with God, but you end up spending time with what you did wrong. This is common. You actually, instead of seeking God, you seek what you've done wrong and try to confess it to God. You get alone and you find the way that you've come up short. You get alone and you find the problem that's in you. And you begin to focus on the problem and what you did wrong, and people call that prayer. People call that good counseling. Do you know what I mean? Everything is in the promise. And you can just glorify God for the promise and watch him take care of everything else. Does that make sense to you guys? And just looping back to what I said in the beginning, that's why when somebody comes in for marriage counseling, I'm not going to talk to you about Hagar and Ishmael. They should have been sent away already. And if you want to send them away, we can right now. But I'm not going to counsel Hagar and Ishmael with you. They're not supposed to be at the table. Make sense? So whenever you look at your spouse's Hagar and Ishmael and that's your issue, why are you allowing them to sit at your table? Why don't you send them away? And look at the Isaac that sits at your spouse's table. The promise of who your spouse is in Christ. Here's a crazy suggestion. Why don't you begin to declare the Isaac that sits at your spouse's table and the wonderful thing that is in your spouse's life, whether they believe in it or not, whether it's manifesting or not. And that's the prophetic, but we can't get into that. You what? Fake it till you make it. Come on. Let me just say this. I had Don's permission to promote this. And I want to close in prayer. Do you guys know who Jamie Galloway is? Okay. The 7th, 8th, and 9th of September. Let me give you those dates again. September 5th and 6th and 7th. Jamie Galloway is coming to our church to do a prophetic school, and he's gonna teach on that. Jamie Galloway is associated with Global Awakening, has a church out in Westchester, and he's an incredible guy. And he's going to be doing about 8 or 9 sessions on, it's going to be just a school of the prophetic for any of you guys who are interested in that. He's going to be promoting it on his website and also on Facebook. So if you guys are friends with him, just friend request him or just look at his page. It'll be advertised on there. We'll have it up on our page soon. I told him to advertise first so I could copy it onto ours because I don't want to promote it in a weird way. I'm going to ask this again. Does anybody in here struggle with migraines? Nobody in here does. Do you guys have one? It felt like something just went right through my head right here. Okay. Let's just go ahead and pray. That's so funny. I think that's like that's so funny because I had somebody say that they were watching, and I said, does anybody have this? And they raised their hand, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and pray. And the video turned off. And they're like, oh. Cracks me up. Okay, this is what I want to do, right? If you guys want this, this is what we're going to do. And this just sounds so silly, but it's not silly. I want to lay hands on you. And I really want this to be like, and I'm just going to declare what it's going to be. I'm laying hands on you because you're going to experience more intimacy in your quiet time. Do you guys understand that? Do you know what's, some of you are going to, just from me saying that, do you know what's going to happen? You guys are going to experience more intimacy in your quiet time. How's that sound? Okay? If you guys are free to go, I'm going to pray for people. If anybody in here has any injuries, I'd love to pray for you or anything like that. But if you guys want that, I want to pray for you because it's very much Jesus to do such a thing. That just in, how to describe it? Just in laying on of hands and saying, God, just by standing up and saying, I want that. Do you know what I mean? Is a life lived saying, I'll have that. Do you know what I mean? Tomorrow will also show if you want that or not by getting a loan. Does that make sense? But at least this is a first step towards that step. Okay, so if anybody who wants that, I'm just going to pray over you. I'm not even going to really just say that much. I'm literally just going to lay hands on you. Okay, if you guys just want to line up, if you guys want to line up, that's fine. And don't feel pressure to come up here. That's so funny. Because the flesh would say, oh God, everyone's going up there. I better get up there.